Welcome to the show. This is the CS Roundup with Russell and Jan. Hi, Jan.
Hey, Russell.
All right, and this time around, we're going to talk about cross-functional relationships. And correct me if I'm wrong, I think we're going to talk about this from the context of if you are a senior customer success leader, how can you enlist your cross-functional colleagues to make sure that you have a well-oiled machine?
Yeah, I mean, I think cross-functional relationships also apply, to individual contributors as well, and they want to think about how to build those relationships. But I think that it does sort of amp it up to the next level once you become a CS leader, for sure.
Yeah, right. You want to make it easy for your reports and your cross-functional colleagues' reports by creating a good foundation so that they don't have to cover for the mistakes of your leadership. So I thought maybe I'd start by just talking about something that I think I assume most people know about the RACI model, but I think that my perception is a lot of people don't formally use it. And I think that that's a big area of lost opportunity. And so what I would
Well,
say
even
is
wait, we shouldn't assume anything, right? So
probably not.
what does RACI stand for?
Okay, so in any sort of a project where there's a step to be done, you would apply a RACI to each step. And RACI is RACI, and that stands for responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed. And those are four different roles that a person could have in that step. So R means responsible, that means that you're doing that step. A means accountable, that means that you may not be performing that step, but you are going to get measured on it. C is consulted, which means that you've been asked for your opinion as the step is built. And I means that you're informed, so you're just told about it later, right? So in any project step, you as an individual could be one of those things. So what you want to do when working cross departmentally is, and I'm thinking specifically here about when you design a customer journey and you plot out the touch points that are a part of that customer journey, and also there's some behind the curtain work that maybe doesn't show up in the customer facing way, but it does show up in a playbook, right? So there's some behind the curtain stuff that has to happen. So we're talking about any customer facing touch point or any play that supports a customer facing touch point. You would want to,
And it can also apply to just anything you are doing within an organization, right?
yeah,
Because if
just
you're
any,
working with finance or, well, even then it applies to customers, right? How is finance interacting with the customer versus how is anybody else working with the customer? And so
right.
really
Or in your case,
apply to everybody.
if finance is not a customer facing department, but they need to work with customer success to be able to communicate about financial matters with customers, then
Or
that would be a behind the curtain thing. But you still need to figure out who's doing what, right?
Or even if they're sending out billing and people are late and they're sending them notices and all that kind of stuff, it could be that finance is doing all of those steps, but hopefully, CS is consulted and informed on that so that they know what's happening with the account, so that they know how many times, finance is reaching out, marketing might also want to know because if they're sending emails out to the customer at the same time, all of those, just coordination, right?
Yeah, so let's use that as an example because I think that's a pretty standard thing that happens in all companies, including SaaS companies, is that you send out a bill to your customers, right? So if you've decided that your finance team is the team that sends out the bill, then you would assign a finance person as the R. They're responsible for that step of sending the bill, right? Accountable is probably the finance leader. It probably is ultimately on the finance leader to make sure that the bills go out on time, right? Jan, you just gave a couple examples of consulted, right? So hopefully the CSM, maybe the marketing team, should have a place to go where they can figure out and validate, well, did this customer actually receive their bill?
Mm-hmm.
Actually, that sounds more
Well,
like an
that's
I,
actually
right?
informed.
That would be an I
Consulted,
informed.
though, might be that if they're how many emails are going out to a customer and how many emails are they going to get overall and generally. I think that's where you want to be consulted, with each other because you want to be on the same page in terms of if a customer is defunct, in pain, can they actually still be on your webinar? Probably not. Things
Yeah.
like that, right? So, like, there are ways in which you want to sort of consult with each other to create policy or, what your approach is going to be as a company.
Right. Another common example of consulted would be before finance sends out a bill, they may want to just check real quickly with the CSM that the bill looks right. Right. So if you
Could
do
be.
pre-billing
Hopefully some of
adjustments,
that's
things like that.
automated, but I've actually worked in organizations where it wasn't.
Oh, that was a monthly fire drill in one of my
Oh,
past roles, is that we had to set aside a whole day
don't
to
even get
just
me
do billing
started.
adjustments.
Don't even get me started. That's a long story. Okay. So
So
then,
anyway, so you can
yes,
apply this RACI model. We just talked through the touch point of sending out a bill, right?
yeah,
And so you don't want to overcomplicate it, but maybe in your customer journey, you've got something like 40 to 60 touch points. You might find roughly 30 that could use a RACI model, right? And just it's a way to clarify your swim lanes, right? So it lets you know what you are supposed to do, what you're the R
right,
for. Um, what can happen if you don't use a racing model is that maybe two people will both do the R thing,
right,
and that creates a mess for the customer, or nobody does it, and so things slip through
right.
the cracks, right? So it's really important to have this racing model in place as you're planning cross-functionally how you're shepherding your customers through that journey.
And so what I would just add, so racy is certainly one thing that doesn't get used enough and really should be. I would say another thing that does not get enough notice is when as a CS leader, especially when you're working cross-functionally with other leaders within the company. That is, it's really, it's just vital. It's absolutely critical to your effectiveness as a leader and what you're able to do then on behalf of your team or behalf of your customers. You really need to pay attention to building those relationships. It's something where you want to think about how you interact with the other cross-functional leaders, with your CEO, and with your board. And what do they need from you? What do you need from them? How you can help them, and how you can help them understand how you can both work together um, to help and aid and meet the needs of your customers who are using your product, right? Like that's the whole point for everybody, right? And and so often CS leaders will get so busy sort of doing their own thing that they have these blinders on and forget to build those cross-functional relationships. And it's just so important, and it's a huge miss if you're not building those relationships. You
So I
will
think of
be
you as
at,
like one of the
excuse me.
ultimate. I think of you as one of the ultimate networkers that I know, and I wonder if you can drop some advice on how to do that. And I think of it both in terms of talking to those people about non-work things to help build a personal relationship, and then also about work things.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it is important. So you want to be sure to take time in identifying, all of the different leaders within your organization that, have an influence that you need to interact with. And then maybe even, those would be the primary ones, but then also think about who you're interacting with that maybe it's sort of the second ring out, right? Like there's the first immediate ring. You're probably working with product closely. Maybe you don't work with engineering as closely, but if you handle the support team, if you're responsible for the support team, you will be. Or if your onboarding team falls under you, you probably will be working with engineering. Think about also where your challenges are. There might be some folks that are on the same page with you, really easy. So you talk to them all the time because it's easy. Well, then you really need to think about for those challenging relationships, how to work with them as well and how to work through what some of those challenges are, because otherwise you will be at a disservice. It'll basically come and bite you, in the rear end. If you don't, you can't just go for the easy stuff. You've got to think about where are my challenges and think about how you can break through that and build those relationships. There's nothing more important you can do for your team than to make certain that you have good smooth working relationships with the other executives on your team.
That's really well said. All right, I think that's a wrap for this week. Cross-functional relationships, have the relationship, and apply a RACI model.
And don't assume that if you report to a leader that they are speaking on your behalf to others. You've got to have that one-on-one relationship across the board with folks. take that on as your own responsibility.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely err on the side of over communicating. All
Yes.
right. Well, that's a wrap for this week. See you next time, Jan.
All right.